Good morning, good afternoon, or indeed good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We hope you are keeping safe during these interesting times. My name is Nikki Stewart from Rockjumper Birding Tours. I'm hosting today's webinar together with Keith Valentine. We wish you all a warm welcome, and we are delighted to see so many of you around the world joining us today. Today promises to be a very interesting Zoom tour discovering the wonders and marvels of Sri Lanka's endemics and big game. If you're new to Zoom, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen to ask questions during the webinar, and we'll endeavor to answer at the end of the webinar. Our speaker today is Stephan Lorenz. Stephan was born in Germany but moved to the United States at a young age and began birding in Texas. He completed a Master's of Science degree focusing on grassland birds before joining various research projects in Australia, Jamaica, Costa Rica, and especially Alaska. Stephan has a broad background in education, including teaching college-level biology and working as a biologist educator for the National Audubon Society. Stephan has been expertly guiding with Rockjumper Birding Tours for the last 3 years. Welcome, Stephan, and without further ado, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nikki, and everybody out there. I'm excited that you can join me for this presentation on birding and wildlife in Sri Lanka. And I will take you on this webinar through the tour and itinerary that we do in Sri Lanka, and it is one of my favorite tours. I went for the first time to Sri Lanka in 2017 and have led tours there pretty much every year since then. And like I said, it remains one of my favorite destinations to visit. Sri Lanka is a medium-sized island that is part of the Indian subcontinent, and mistakenly some people consider it part of India, but of course it is an independent island nation located off the southeastern tip of peninsular India there. So let's take a closer look at the island. It is medium-sized, 432 kilometers in length and 224 kilometers in width. Has a lot of coastline, 1,340 kilometers of coastline. The capital is located on the west coast here in Colombo. Interestingly, it was connected to the Indian mainland as recently as the late 14th century along what is called the Adams Bridge. You can see up here. Now that's an area of shallows and small islands. It's no longer connected, but it was connected to the Indian mainland at some point. And so it's quite amazing that such a high variety of endemics have evolved on the island. And the reason for that is that most of the endemics, or I should actually say all of them, are found in the southwestern part of the island, which is the wet zone, and the highlands of the southern part of the island. So there's the northern coastal plains and arid areas of India separate the wet zone in Sri Lanka from wetter forest in southern India. So there is quite a bit of separation there in terms of landscape. In addition that now the Adams Bridge is no longer connected. So just let me give you a bit of a summary of birding in Sri Lanka. There are currently 34 endemics that are recognized. That number is likely to increase. There are a couple of interesting subspecies. There are a wide variety of birds found from the Indian subcontinent. It's a great introduction to birding in the region. In Asia in general, if you've never been to Asia, Sri Lanka is a fantastic place to go for the first time. There's plenty of other wildlife, like leopards, for example. Sri Lanka is one of the best places in Asia to see these big cats. And you can really have a safari type experience. It is also very popular with mammal watching. Sri Lanka still supports excellent populations of many mammals. It is a friendly nation, really welcoming people. There's a fascinating culture, a lot of history, ancient Buddhist site. There's a delicious food, which is quite unique from Indian food. It's quite different. Overall, it is an easy-paced tour. It's 11 days long. We usually run it between October and February, which is the dry season in the part of the island that we visit. And it's excellent for photography. Birds and wildlife are not hunted or persecuted in Sri Lanka. The birds are quite approachable, and there are a number of large national parks that protect populations of mammals. Just a bit more background about the country itself. It was a former British colony, became a republic in 1972. Buddhism, like I said, is the main religion. It is considered a biodiversity hotspot. Sinhalese and Tamil are the official languages, and English is widely spoken, of course. And tourism, tea, clothing, and agriculture are the main economies. Kitulgala at 2,524 meters is the highest mountain in Sri Lanka. It is found right in the middle of the southern highlands, not accessible to visitors. There's actually a military station on top. And Sri Lanka is a tropical island dominated by tropical climate, warm and humid in the lowlands, but the highlands experience cooler temperatures and it's quite comfortable. And let me talk about the accommodations briefly. We stay in small local hotels, all of them very comfortable. This is the one we stayed in Nuwara. In the lowlands, all the hotels have air conditioning. In the highlands, we actually don't need air conditioning because it cools down at night. And all the hotels have their own restaurants that serve up delicious food. So in the evening, we can sit back, relax, do our bird list, have a delicious meal, and either retire or go out and do some owling. In Kitulgala, for example, we stay at the historic Plantation Hotel. This is the veranda of the hotel here, overlooking the Kalani River and some excellent forest nearby that offers plenty of birds. And then in Sinharaja, for example, it's a very small village right next to the forest reserve. And there's a new lodge there that we stay in. It gets better every year. Here's the room. You can see a veranda overlooking the rainforest. And we can see several species of endemics right from the veranda there. During one tour, I even heard the near mythical Sri Lanka bay owl from inside my room here. So lots of great birds right outside our doorstep. Let's talk briefly about the food. Sri Lanka is famous and well known for spicy food. That does not mean we can't accommodate somebody who doesn't like spicy food. They're always able and willing to make extra dishes without too much spiciness in it. But it is quite different from Indian food. There are lots of vegetable curries, lots of kale, cucumber, eggplants, kale and coconut salad, lots of rice, of course, but everything is very delicious. In terms of meats, they usually have fish or chicken. Here we are at one of our lunch stops on the way from the highlands to the lowlands. Here we are enjoying a local lunch in Sinharaja Reserve at a place called Martin Simple Lodge. And they always also make some fries for us. And what you can't see here in this photo is we're actually on a porch overlooking a rainforest and valley below us, and it's a great spot for raptors. Right here from the lunch table, we've seen things like black eagle, rufous-bellied eagle, Leghis hawk eagle, so it's right in the middle of the rainforest. Transport, we travel by a spacious bus between sites. Some of the national parks, we use safari-style jeeps. Fortunately, transfer times between sites are pretty limited. The longest drive may be about 4 hours, mainly trying to get out of Colombo, the capital, which can have lots of traffic. But overall, we don't spend too much time traveling between sites. We spend most of our time out in the field birding and enjoying the wildlife. Let me give you a few bird statistics. We can expect between 235 to 250 species. Like I said, there are 34 endemics. And on the majority of the tours, we see all of these endemics. That does not mean that they're easy. They're actually what I call the tricky five. And they're all gettable, but they do require some luck and some work on our part. And sometimes you get them at the 11th hour. So it definitely keeps things exciting for every tour. But it is one of the few tours that can get all endemics on the island, and we have an excellent itineraries that targets all of them. There are also 20 near endemics that are mainly shared with southern India. And in general, it's great for water birds. There are big wetlands remaining in Sri Lanka that support water bird populations of species that have disappeared in other parts of their range. And the large national parks also support plenty of raptors. Here you can see some of the more widespread and common birds like white-rumped shama up here, yellow-billed babbler, Tickle's blue flycatcher, white-browed fantail. Sri Lanka is a great place to see wintering Indian blue robin, really stunning little bird. And then in the bottom right-hand corner here, Ziding cisticula. Depending on your likes or dislikes of cisticolas, this is the only one that we see in Sri Lanka on the tour, so it makes it quite easy. And then here in the upper right-hand corner is a juvenile changeable hawk eagle. So let me give you an overview of the entire tour so you know a little bit geographically where we go. We focus, like I said, on the southwestern part of the island. So the tour starts at Bandara Raike International Airport, which is just a little bit north of Colombo. And then we travel east to the small town of Kitulgala, which is located right on the Kalani River. We spend 2 nights there. Then we travel to the Highland city of Nuwara, where we also spend 2 nights. That's our jumping off point to visit the Hortons National Park, Horton Plains National Park. From there, we leave the highlands and travel southeast to Tissamaharama, which is a town surrounded by lakes and wetlands, which is really fun, easy open country birding there. And we spend 2 nights here using this as a jumping off point to visit Yala National Park. From there, we travel to Mbilipitia. We spend a short morning at the coastal Bundala National Park. We visit Walawe National Park. And then from there, we head on west to the last destination of the tour, where we spend 3 nights in Sinharaja, and we visit the Sinharaja Rainforest Reserve, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which hosts most of the endemics. Actually, up to 30 species of the 34 can be found here. So the trip is a little bit backloaded in terms of endemics, and every once in a while, folks get a little nervous. We're sort of halfway through the trip, still missing half the endemics, but the reason for that is almost all of them are found in the lowland rainforest of Sinharaja. And then we complete our loop by heading back to Colombo. So really a great itinerary, not too much traveling between sites for some fantastic birds. Colombo is a large city, about 1 million people, situated right on the coast. A lot of construction going on there, and we don't spend much time here. We leave and head out to Kitulgala. We may see some birds in the city already, like the ubiquitous spotted dove, Indian jungle crow, house crow. And more surprisingly, oftentimes we can actually see spot-billed pelicans flying right through the middle of downtown between the skyscrapers. And this is a species that has declined in many parts of its range, but is still doing well in Sri Lanka, and we see it in several places. So we head east first to Kitulgala, which is located on the Kalani River, and just north of what's called the Makandava Forest Reserve. You can see on this map here, there's still some lowland rainforest remaining, but we actually spend most of our time birding in the tea plantations and forest edge where the birds are that we're looking for here. This is the Kalani River. Famously, this is the site where they filmed Bridge Over the River Kwai. That bridge, of course, is no longer there. It was destroyed, as you may have seen in the movie, but there's a swing bridge that we use to get back and forth across the river. So the hotel is situated right on the edge of the river, and we go to the far side of it where there are tea plantations, forest edge with lots of birds. And there's another spot on the river where we actually use a small local ferry to cross. So this guy, a local, he waits on the edge of the river for locals and visitors alike to cross the river there. This is also popular for tourists to visit to go rafting. And the forest edge here is quite beautiful, full of fruiting trees, and we wander along and already find many of the first endemics. The first morning we go out, we very quickly come across this guy. So this is the Sri Lanka jungle fowl. Looks similar to a chicken, but it's different from the red jungle fowl in other parts of Asia. Has this really nice yellow center to the comb, and also the call is quite different. So this is oftentimes one of the first birds we hear as we wake up for the morning in Kitulgala. And then we head out to look for one of the main endemic targets of Kitulgala already, the chestnut-backed owlet. This is a small diurnal owl, and it is not common on the tour, and Kitulgala is the best chance to see it. And we oftentimes get great scope views. It is actually, there's a pair resident in somebody's backyard, and we can enter the area and find this bird, really cute small owlet. The fruiting trees and around the forest edge support good numbers of bulbils, like this near-endemic white-browed bulbul. There's the near-endemic yellow-browed bulbul, and as you guessed it, here's another near-endemic. This is called the square-tailed bulbuls. All these near-endemic bulbuls are also found in southern India. And this was split from the black bulbul, the widespread black bulbul, and is now considered the square-tailed bulbul. And there's also an endemic bulbul, the black-capped bulbul, which is not terribly numerous, not that common, but we can oftentimes find it around Kitulgala, sometimes nesting right to the outdoor restaurant of the hotel. And the restaurant right there offers a fantastic view of the forest, and we've got many excellent birds during the lunch hour. If we pay attention to the understory, we might hear this very sweet and musical song. And this is the endemic brown-capped babbler, a typical ground-loving babbler. Can be quite skulky, but since much of the habitat is quite open due to the tea plantations on forest edge, Kitulgala is a great place to see it. And we will also spend some time searching for this guy, the tawny-bellied babbler, which favors overgrown weedy pastures or thickets. And this is not an endemic, but it is an endemic subspecies and worth looking for, because this could be a potential split in the future. It's quite different looking than tawny-bellied babblers on the mainland of India. And the tea plantations are also excellent for the common emerald dove, which wander in the open area, sometimes right on the path, and will flush up to open perches like this. Just a really gorgeous dove that's quite common throughout. And this guy is also quite common, the Indian robin, which can often be found singing right in the hotel gardens. And then we also hear a lot of Sri Lanka hanging parrots, a very small parrot that's endemic to Sri Lanka. And oftentimes we just see them zipping through the canopy. They fly very fast. We've dubbed them little green bullets on previous tours. And sometimes at first, for the first hour or so, it can be a bit frustrating because everybody hears and sees lots of them as they're flying by. But with patience, we usually find a small flock of them in a fruiting tree, feeding quietly and contently. We can oftentimes get great views like this one. Kitulgala also hosts the other endemic parrot of Sri Lanka, the Layard's parakeet. Quite beautiful with this distinctive yellow tip to the tail. And overall, we'll see 5 species of parrots and parakeets during the entire tour. And then there's the red-backed flameback, which favors open forest. This is Sri Lanka's latest endemic. So just a few years ago, there were only 33 endemics. Now there are 34. This was split from the black-rumped flameback. And what's really interesting about this is there are actually black-rumped flamebacks found in northern Sri Lanka, and they have bright yellow backs. And this red-backed flameback is restricted to the southern part of Sri Lanka. So our tour actually only encounters red-backed flamebacks. But recent research has shown that both species meet in central Sri Lanka, and there's an 80-kilometer wide hybrid zone, but it appears that this hybrid zone is stable and not expanding, so taxonomists consider the red-backed flameback to be distinct from the widespread black-rumped flameback. And I put this picture in here. I took this near Wolpatu National Park, which is in central Sri Lanka. And this shows one of these sort of odd hybrids. You can see it's got mostly yellow back, but showing some sort of reddish orange on the back. And this is in the middle of the hybrid zone. So it's quite interesting that there is this hybrid zone, but taxonomists still consider this a distinct species, the 34th endemic red-backed flameback. Kitulgala is also great to see a Sri Lanka gray hornbill, a medium-sized hornbill, often somewhat inconspicuous among fruiting trees. But once we find them, they can be very confiding, like most birds in Sri Lanka, and allow close approach. As you can see, photography is really fantastic throughout the tour. And the open trees between the tea plantations are excellent to scope for canopy birds. So oftentimes some of the canopy-loving pigeons, mynas, and barbets are much easier to see in Kitulgala than later in the tour. So we focus on getting good views of those. And this is the endemic Sri Lanka green pigeon right here, a nice male. And one of the signature sounds, let me play this to you. Turn down the volume a bit. One of the signature sounds of the wetter parts of Sri Lanka is the endemic yellow-fronted barbet. You can hear this throughout the day. If you are familiar with Asian rainforest, barbets feature heavily in the soundscape in the background, and the yellow-fronted barbet is definitely one of those. Beautiful endemic barbet, actually in a monotypic genus. Much more uncommon is the smaller endemic barbet, the crimson-fronted barbet, and has sort of this Morse code-like call. And Kitulgala is actually the best place to see this uncommon barbet. You could hear in the recording I just played lots of yellow-fronted barbets calling in the background there, which are common. But this small guy, bright green, and despite the unique facial pattern, can be hard to spot in the canopy. And we always make sure we try to get one or two at least in Kitulgala, which is the best place. And then in recent years, on recent tours, the near mythical Sri Lanka bay owl has been seen. This was split from the widespread oriental bay owl, and it's a very tricky owl still, and was not very often recorded in Sri Lanka. But during the past couple of years and tours, we have seen this species with some regularity. It's been seen by very few birders. It's very tricky to see at night. And this particular individual we saw on the last tour I led to Sri Lanka. Our local guide went out very early in the morning to actually try to find the endemic serendip scops owl. And we were near the hotel birding. I got a text from him saying, I found an owl. I got very excited. And then he texted more and he said, it's a Sri Lanka bay owl. I got a lot more excited. We rushed down to the ferry I showed you earlier. If there would have been a spare paddle, I would have grabbed it to get us across faster. And luckily, when we got there, the owl was still on its day roost, and our group got fantastic views of this Sri Lanka bay owl. And since then, most of our tours have actually found this bird. As we're learning more about it, about its whereabouts, it can be found. We also see a couple mammals already in Sri Lanka. This is a grizzled giant squirrel, the size almost of a small house cat. They come in two varieties. This lighter colored version is more found in the dry zone of Sri Lanka, and in the wet zone, it has a much darker fur. We also see endemic primates on the tour. This is the toque macaque, only found in Sri Lanka. This is a young animal here. And in drier areas, we see the tufted gray langur. It's not endemic, but a beautiful primate and widespread throughout the tour. From Kitulgala, we will head further east. You can see my pointer here, moving up into the highlands, to the highland city of Nuwara, and cooler climates. We will make a stop along the way at the St. Clair's Tea Castle. Temperatures here are very comfortable. You can see it can be quite misty and cloudy, but this is a great stop to break up the journey, try some local tea, also buy some tea, of course. And let me show you the landscape here, dominated by tea plantations. So much of the highlands of Sri Lanka are dominated by tea. Tea was actually introduced to Sri Lanka after a disease killed off the coffee crops. And now, of course, the island is famous for its teas. Here's an image of Nuwara. You can see, again, tea in the foreground here and the city in the background. It's surrounded by forested mountains that have still lots of habitat that's excellent for birding. And as we have entered the highlands, we quickly see a host of new endemics. This is the striking yellow-eared bulbul, for bulbul quite beautiful. Also, we have left the widespread Indian white-eyes behind, and in the highlands of Sri Lanka, it is the endemic Sri Lanka white-eye, usually found in active flocks and quite approachable, and we see quite a lot of them. Also, the gray-headed canary flycatcher. It's a widespread Asian species, and in Sri Lanka, it's restricted to the highlands and the wet forest. This oftentimes travels with small feeding flocks. And the hill swallow. This is a near endemic, again, restricted to southern India and Sri Lanka, and they will oftentimes nest right next to our hotel. And there's a yard or garden we pass by as we go to our birding site, and they oftentimes have these mountain horned agamas. This is an endemic lizard. The other common name for it is rhinoceros lizard, not surprisingly, but a really unique, neat small lizard with the males sporting this horn on their upper lip. One of the many neat reptiles that we can encounter during the tour. And then in the evening, we try to see another one of what I call the tricky five. This is the Sri Lanka whistling thrush. This is a very shy whistling thrush, quite a bit smaller than other whistling thrushes in Asia. And it really prefers dense tangles along highland streams and ponds. And this is one of the more unique birding stakeouts of any tour, I must admit. We go to an area with a ravine and a small stream, and we can oftentimes hear the bird quite easily. The pairs call back and forth to each other, but we wait until dusk, and right when it's almost too dark to see, the bird oftentimes will emerge into the open on its way to roost, and we can get everybody on the silhouette of the bird and then use a weak flashlight to light it up so we can see the beautiful color of these deep blue colors. If that doesn't work, we also have a good chance to see it in Horton Plains National Park the next day, where this image was actually taken. We oftentimes see it the evening before, and it's always an exciting outing. So the next day, we spend a full morning in Horton Plains National Park. You can see we come up through Patipoa and drive up. Lots of mountain forest here interspersed by these highland grasslands. And on the way, we make a stop for the Sri Lanka wood pigeon. This is a nomadic species, so not always easy to track down, but luckily there's a spot where they come to drink regularly very early in the morning. When we reach Horton Plains National Park, we enter these natural high elevation grasslands. This is a very wild national park. It still harbors leopard populations. Reputedly, these are some of the largest and furriest leopards in the world because they live at high elevations. But they're very difficult to see here because of the dense habitat. And here's a nice view across the highlands from a spot called World's End, and shows you the ruggedness and habitat remaining in these mountains of Sri Lanka. And then we focus on thickets, roadside thickets, to look for a couple of skulking birds, like this dark-fronted babbler. This is another one to keep a close eye on. There's a subspecies in southwestern Sri Lanka, nigrifrons, which is quite different from other populations, and this could be a potential split. A friend of mine who's actually responsible for the red-backed flameback split, he works at the University of Colombo. He is currently working on this guy too, and maybe in a few years this will be recognized as a distinct species, so we definitely make sure to see this one. And then we look for one of the master skulkers. This could also be considered one of the tricky five, the Sri Lanka bush warbler, which really favors roadside thickets or streamside thickets. It's a very strange bush warbler. It's got a really short tail, a very rotund body. It's in a monotypic genus, and every time I see it, I have a hard time believing that it's actually considered a bush warbler. It looks like something very different. But with patience and a little bit of luck, we can sometimes get great views of it, although getting a good photo of it is challenging. And then we also see an endemic subspecies of Indian blackbird. This was split from the common blackbird a few years ago. And early morning, the birds are quite confiding out in the open on the lawns and roadside edge. And 1 hour after sunrise, they become nearly impossible to find. They really disappear and hide out in the thickets. Sometimes takes quite a bit of patience to find them. And there are, of course, also mammals in Horton Plains National Park. Some bar deer are quite abundant, and we oftentimes also see Indian brown mongoose. So anywhere in Sri Lanka, even in transfers between sites, it's always worth keeping an eye out for mammals, which are still doing very well throughout the island. In the afternoon, we head back to Nuwara for lunch, and then later on head out to Victoria Park. This is a very unlikely birding spot, actually. It's a small park in the middle of the city, has lots of picnickers and visitors. It's quite busy, but it has a small stream running along the edge of the park that's well wooded, and it's just amazing the quality of birds we can find in this small area that is quite busy with human traffic. It's one of the best places to see Indian pitta really well, one of the easier pittas to see in the world. And these guys are here on their wintering grounds. They've migrated south from India, and they're quite confiding and sometimes right in the middle of the path of the park. Along this small stream there, it's also a great place to see forest wagtail, also here on its wintering grounds. And then we also look for one of the stars of not just the area here, but of the tour in general, the beautiful pied thrush. They breed in the Himalayas, and they're not easy to see in their breeding grounds. The majority of the world population winters in Sri Lanka, and it's probably one of the best places to see this beautiful thrush. They are quite amazing at hiding out in that small park. We've spent up to 2 hours searching carefully, looking, not seeing any. I remember during one of my tours, one finally appeared, a beautiful male. We all got great views of it, perched up in a tree. Then another male appeared, and then another, and another, and another. We ended up having 8 of these, all perched in the same tree, and we had no idea where they had been for the previous 2 hours. But we usually wait until late afternoon when they're more likely to emerge. Then the other key target of the Sri Lanka tour and of that particular location is the beautiful Kashmir flycatcher. As the name suggests, this is not an easy bird to see in its breeding grounds, and it does come mostly to Sri Lanka to winter, and Sri Lanka, and particularly Victoria Park, is one of the best places to see it. A really stunning small flycatcher, migrates all the way into the Kashmir region to breed. And from Nuwara, what we do is we will actually head southeast to Tissamaharama, driving out of the highlands, and we will head down into the coastal plains. On the way, we can stop at Rawana Falls, one of many waterfalls that tumble out of the wet highlands of Sri Lanka. This one is right along the roadside edge, makes for a convenient stop. And then we stop at a small bird sanctuary along the way where we can often find roosting brown wood owl. And this is the start of what turns out to be one of the neatest owl feasts that's the best way I can describe it on any tour. So we have this brown wood owl, then we head down to Tissamaharama, where local kids will be waiting, and they take us to their backyard and show us a pair of nesting jungle owlets. Really cute owls. These are also diurnal, like the endemic chestnut-backed owlet. Then we walk over to another yard where we can oftentimes find the roosting Indian Scops owl. Great study in camouflage here. They sometimes even nest under the eaves of the houses. This was one of a pair nesting in a tree in a front yard. And then we walk on down to a river site where we can often find the brown fish owl. And this all happens within 20, 30 minutes and leaves everybody quite surprised and excited to see so many owls so quickly. And then in the evening, we even have another stakeout. There's a tree with a big hollow, a big cavity in it that hosts a pair of roosting eastern barn owls. And that finishes the owls for that day. But I must say, in general, Sri Lanka is fantastic for owls and night birds. Up to 10 species of owls are possible. We usually see 6 or 7 of them on day roosts. And then if we go out at night, we can add a few more. And there are also some nightjars that we can see. Then we focus our attention on the wetlands, which are full of herons and egrets, like this beautiful purple heron right here. There are also many pheasant-tailed jacanas. This is a beautiful male and full breeding plumage, quite common in some of the lily pad-covered wetlands. And then with luck, we may even find a black bittern hiding out among the reeds. And then we finish that particular day, we going to a small palm plantation. And again, the local landowners are welcoming. And we look for the uncommon and beautiful white napier. They have nesting and roosting holes there, and we set up for the evening and wait for the birds to come in. And the local landowners, they'll even put out some chairs for us so we can sit back, relax, and wait for this beautiful woodpecker to make an appearance. Then we spend a full day in Yala National Park. So as you can see from this aerial map here, this is a very big block of wild habitat. This was one of the first national parks in Sri Lanka, established in 1938, and it hosts pretty much all the big mammals found in the country. It is an exciting, fantastic day. We usually see well over 100 bird species and lots of other wildlife. So definitely one of the highlights of the tour. We use these safari jeeps right here to travel through the park. So we enter early in the morning, spend all morning exploring the road system. Then we come here for a field lunch. No vehicles are allowed in the park for 2 hours in the afternoon to give the wildlife a break. We enjoy a lunch here. It's right on the ocean. You can see a little bit of the ocean back here. And then we head out again in the afternoon and explore the park further. Always some surprises to see, fantastic photo opportunities from these open vehicles. Here's a bit of a landscape. There are lots of wetlands. It is the arid coastal plain, so you get this scrubby forest, a couple of patches of wet forest that contain some interesting birds. And then it's hard to see in this photo, but in the background you can see some granite outcrops too. And that's favored by one of the star animals of the national park, leopards. So of course these wetlands attract a wide variety of wetland birds, like oriental darters. Here's a gray heron riding on the back or taking a break on the back of a water buffalo. So the water buffalo in the park, they roam wild, but they probably derived from domestic stock. It's hard to say whether there were any genuinely wild water buffaloes left in Sri Lanka, but nevertheless, they're impressive animals. It's a great place for storks. We can see all 5 species of storks that are possible on the tour. Here alone in Yala National Park, here's a woolly-necked stork, absolutely stunning and beautiful painted stork. And then with a little bit of luck, we may even find the rare lesser adjutant looks like a dinosaur as it stalks through the wetlands. The other stork species we see are Asian openbill, and then the very rare black-necked stork, which is even larger than this lesser adjutant. And black-necked storks, there are only a handful of pairs left in Sri Lanka, but we can oftentimes find it as we explore Yala National Park. And the open grasslands and other wetlands host a wide variety of shorebirds, waterfowl. Here's the yellow-wattled lapwing. And it's hard not to stop every few hundred meters to take more photos of birds. It is filled to the brim with wildlife. Some areas, some roads are swarming with bee eaters, like chestnut-headed bee eaters can sometimes be seen by the hundreds. Other birds like green bee eater, also quite beautiful, can be seen by the dozens. And you can see in the safari jeeps, these birds are very approachable and make fantastic photographic subjects. And you can also easily find the near endemic Jordan's bushlark. This is another one that's only found in southern India and Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka is probably the best place to see it, as it tends to be quite common in the grasslands there. It's got this very distinctive song. And the main endemic target during our visit to Yala National Park is the Sri Lanka wood shrike. This endemic is unique. It's the only one that's restricted to the dry zone of Sri Lanka, so we don't find it in the highlands or the rainforest locations we visit. But in Yala, we have excellent chances to see it. They usually move around in small family groups or pairs, and we always spend quite a bit of time making sure we see it and make sure we don't leave Yala National Park without it. And the other specialty of Yala is this Iora right here. This is called the Marshall's Iora, or white-tailed Iora. And it's got a really unique distribution. It's only found in Western India, parts of Southern India, and then a very few parts of the dry zone in Sri Lanka. Most likely a relic population in Sri Lanka. And it happens to be that the picnic site in Yala is a great place to see it. Can be a bit tricky to identify from the more common Iora, but we can usually find a pair or two. The Marshall's Iora, another specialty of Yala. In terms of mammals, we see plenty as we drive along the roads. Ruddy mongoose is quite common. We can see more sambar deer and observe some interesting behavior, like these two stags fighting right here. There are 300 to 350 Asian elephants in Yala National Park, and we're sure to come across some. This male right here was actually throwing up sand. It was getting a bit annoyed because another jeep had gotten a little bit close to it. So you definitely don't want to get closer than this, but we can get fantastic views of Asian elephants. With luck, we'll see golden jackals, which are found in the park, and even sloth bears possible. Sri Lanka is actually a good place to see this Asiatic bear, this sloth bear, and Yala being our best chance for it. And then, of course, Yala National Park is well known and famous for leopards. Reputedly, it has the densest leopard population in the world. It's definitely the best place in Asia to see it. And I took this photo during one of our tours. We found this young animal just resting in a tree. And we have excellent chances of encountering one or maybe even more leopards during our visit there. And oftentimes, the jeep drivers are connected by phone to each other. So if a leopard is spotted somewhere in the park, we can try to go see it. There are also lots of reptiles, like impressive mugger crocodiles, or sometimes called swamp crocodile. There are monitor lizards, this one here hiding out in a tree hole. And oftentimes we also find the Indian star tortoise. So in addition to the large variety of lizards we can see, we also see some other unique reptiles. And then if anybody has energy left, we can go out in the evening of that day. And this is a unique call of the near endemic Jordan's nightjar. And we have a great spot for it there, where we can actually see Jordan's nightjar, which will oftentimes perch up on branches or on bushes. And we can also oftentimes see Indian nightjar, which perches on the ground. So that just adds to the variety of nocturnal birds we can find on the tour. Then we will spend a short morning, too short in some cases, at Bundala National Park. That's a coastal national park. And we focus on the salt works here, these salt pans. And it's filled to the brim with Palearctic shorebirds or waders, depending on where you're from. And pretty much any Palearctic species you can think of either winters here or occurs as a migrant. There's so many shorebirds here, it's worth a whole nother presentation alone. But just to give you a brief example, little ringed plovers are common. One of the other specialties we look for is the small pratincoal, which will roost out on the dikes between the salt pans. We can oftentimes get great views of these. And Bundala National Park is one of those exciting places where many surprises turn up. On recent tours, we found greater painted snipe, oriental pratincoal, even saw Sri Lanka's third bayback shrike. It's a really neat outing. And within 3 to 4 hours, we almost see 100 species here. Really fantastic and excited birding. Also, one of the better spots to see the impressive gray-headed fish eagle, another species that has declined in many parts of its range and is still doing well in Sri Lanka. So from Bundala National Park, we head towards Mbilapitiya, and then we visit Walawe National Park, which is famous for Asian elephants. There's a herd of about 500 animals. In terms of birds, for us it's exciting, and again has a lot of wetland areas. As you can see in this photo here, you can see some of the highlands in the background. And it also has a lot of shrub habitat, which we haven't had a chance to cover up to this point. So there are a couple of unique species that we look for here. The open areas are great for raptors. This is an adult changeable hawk eagle. And again, you can see these are encountered in good numbers with many photo opportunities. In some open areas or along the wetlands, we can find the great thickney or great stone curlew, oftentimes resting on the ground like this. And then we can also find a great variety of cuckoos. And since the park is dominated by shrubby habitat, actually lots of it has been overtaken by a non-native lantana. The sort of scrub-loving cuckoos are quite common, like this greater cuckoo right here. That's a really common species. But the rarer species are the near-endemic blue-faced malkoa. In Walawe National Park offers great chances to see this beautiful cuckoo, about the size of a squirrel cuckoo. And then also the Sirkira malkoa. This species has a fairly large range, all the way from Sri Lanka to Nepal, but it's nowhere easy to find. It's a bit reminiscent of a lesser ground cuckoo from the neotropics. Quite skulky, spending most of the time on the ground, creeping through dense vegetation. During one particular visit, we actually got to the park right after heavy morning rains, and right as we pulled in, the sun came out and things started to dry out, and cuckoos were appearing left and right, sitting out in the open, drying out their plumage. And we saw no less than a dozen of these. So it's quite interesting to see that it apparently is a numerous species, but never easy to see. But that was quite the afternoon we had there. We saw many malkoas and other cuckoos as we traveled through the park. And this is also a great place for the Malabar pied hornbill. There are some large fig trees in the park that this species favors. And this is a species, it's not endemic, it's near endemic, but much easier to see in Sri Lanka than it is in India, for example, and quite an impressive hornbill. And there are lots of Indian peafowl throughout Sri Lanka. And this sound is quite common throughout the tour. So in Walawe National Park, they're quite abundant. And with a little bit of luck, we may even catch a male in full display like this. I took this picture, I think 2 years ago at Walawe. common but very impressive species. And of course, we have more chances to observe Asian elephants up close and really enjoy some of their behaviors as we can watch small herds throughout the park. And just to go back to the main map here, so once we have finished Nuwara, we travel to Sinharaja, where that's the last destination of the tour. We spend 3 nights there, where we can find all the remaining endemics. It is a beautiful lowland rainforest. It was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1988, and it's about 21 by 7 kilometers, so it's not that large of a reserve, but it hosts 30 of the 34 endemics. We spend a day walking along this trail right here. It looks like a long distance on this picture, but it's not. 2 miles, a gentle trail leading through prime habitat. Here's just a picture showing some of the rainforest. And here's a lookout. You can see the forest edge where it transitions into non-native pine forest. And we get around by these, using these old Jeeps to get to the trailhead. Some of the roads are muddy and steep. Here's some of our local drivers. The local guides at Sinharaja are fantastic. They know where all the birds are, experts at finding serendip scops out. And here's Ashoka, our local guide. He worked with the feeding flocks in Sinharaja for many years. He's an expert on Sri Lankan birds and an owl whisperer. He's amazing at getting owls and finding owls on day roosts. As we head down the trail, we will encounter the spot-winged thrush, which is quite confiding, coming up right to your feet, looking for prey in the leaf litter and mud. And then I put this illustration in here. This shows the famous mixed flocks in Sinharaja. They've been studied for several decades. They can contain more than 20 species, half of them endemic. And this illustration shows how they divide out in terms of canopy height, with canopy species and mid-canopy species and some of the ground-loving species. So we always hope to encounter a feeding flock when we enter Sinharaja. And what we listen for in particular is the Sri Lanka drongo. This is a core member of a mixed flock and it acts as a sentinel. And it actually has a specialized call that it can utter in the early morning, like a musical call, that it can utter early in the morning, and it summons the feeding flock. So when we hear Sri Lanka drongos, we oftentimes follow it and try to find the remaining members of that flock. The other common member of a feeding flock is the endemic orange-billed babbler, oftentimes the most vocal member and numerous member. So we also listen to them. There can be up to 50 individual orange-billed babblers in a feeding flock. Also, the Sri Lanka scimitar babbler likes to join feeding flocks, a bit more skulky than the other babblers, but we can oftentimes find it here at Sinharaja. And then a real prize of Sinharaja, this likely the only place we see it, the endemic ashy-headed laughing thrush. You can walk down a trail and everything is absolutely quiet. You come back 10 minutes later, you're surrounded by these guys, and then they disappear very quickly. So these feeding flocks move rapidly through the forest, but the local guides often know the timing of these different flocks. Even the beautiful Malabar trogon, a near endemic, will join these feeding flocks. And then a real prize of Sinharaja is the endemic red-faced malkoa, a very large malkoa, incredibly adept at hiding in the canopy, tends to stick to very dense vegetation. I've only ever seen it associated with the feeding flock, never by itself, but these beautiful red combs over the eye, stunning endemic. And the large crimson-backed flameback, the second endemic woodpecker of Sri Lanka, will also join these feeding flocks on occasion. And then one of the most iconic endemics is the comical, in my opinion, almost cartoon-like Sri Lanka blue magpie. You can see these reddish wattles right here, accenting the color of the head and this beautiful blue body plumage and red bill. Here was one, we went to the visitor center early in the morning where a flock of these sometimes comes in to pick insects from the lights that have been left on overnight. And they came across this small snake out in the open, And I must admit, in this encounter, the snake lost. So these are quite adept predators, these Sri Lanka blue magpies. And this is one bird that we hear very often. It's got a pretty distinct call. Typical kukal call. But it's quite skulky, not like the greater kukal. The green-billed kukal sticks to the dense vegetation, but with patience, we can oftentimes get great views of it. And then the local guides will oftentimes look for the serendip skopsal on a day roost. This was a species that was not seen in life by ornithologists until 2001, described in 2004. It's quite amazing that it was overlooked for so long, but it's very difficult to see at night, has a very quiet call, and it's incredibly camouflaged during the day. Tends to roost low to the ground and mimics dead leaves, always in an area where there's a lot of dead vegetation. And it's got these pseudo ear tufts it uses for camouflage. And I'm always amazed at how local guides are able to find these small owls on the day roost. We never know where they're going to be. Sometimes they're close to a trail. Sometimes we have to hike off trail a little bit. But this is oftentimes one of the most wanted species for anybody joining the tour. And then we finish with a last two tricky of the tricky five. These are oftentimes the last endemics that we see on the tour. One of them is the Sri Lanka thrush, split from the, used to be part of the scaly thrush complex. They have extremely quiet contact calls. We have to listen for it very carefully. They prefer open, muddy ground and can be very skulky. So this species sometimes makes its way till the 11th hour. We start looking for it right from the first morning in Sinharaja, but most of the time we can find it and get great views of it. And the other tricky one, easy to hear. Let me play the turn on the volume, sorry. This is a pair duetting. The Sri Lanka spurfowl, quite secretive. It's a small species of spurfowl. Fortunately, there's a local yard in the village of Sinharaja where somebody is taken to feeding the birds, and oftentimes there's a pair of spurfowl that comes in early in the morning. If they don't come in, they can be very tricky to see in the forest. And then we'll finish off with another nocturnal species on a day roost. Here's a pair of Sri Lanka frogmouth, near endemic. The male is the grayish one on the left here. The female tends to be more rufous. It is actually quite easy to see at night. It's a common species, but local guides will often know the whereabouts of the roosting pair, and we can get great views like this. And Sinharaja is also a great place to see one of the other endemic primates, the purple-faced langur. And I just take you back briefly here to the main map. After we finish our 3 nights in Sinharaja, we head back towards Colombo and the international airport and flights home. And I appreciate you joining me. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. A quick rundown of some of the fantastic birds we can find in Sri Lanka and some of the other wildlife. Incidentally, I'll be leading a tour in 2021, January of 2021. It's a small group tour, and it still has some spaces remaining. So hopefully with things improving, you can join us on a birding adventure in Sri Lanka. And thank you very much again, and thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Keith.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephan. That was absolutely fantastic. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, wherever you were tuning in from. If you do have any questions, we don't have anything on the Q&A right now, but if you do have any questions that you would like answered, please do get in touch with us. That's info@rockjumper.com, and we'll be very happy to assist you.
Thank you. And also from my side, thank you, Stephan. Just to let everyone know, next week's webinar, same time, next week, Wednesday, we will feature the bird family that is very high up on most people's favorite lists, so the hummingbirds. Forrest Rowland, one of our most popular tour leaders, We'll be showcasing the myriad varieties of these extraordinary little birds. So Forrest will entertain you with stories, facts, and plenty of interesting information featuring hummingbirds front and center. The webinars in the series are being offered free of charge, but should you, however, wish to donate towards our tour leaders, we have a GoFundMe donation link that is still open, and it will be emailed out when we send you a copy of the video. And thank you again to everybody joining us from around the world today, and we look forward to you joining us next week. From all of us at the Rockjumper team, thank you very much, and have a good day and good evening. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.